So the purpose of my talk today is to not to give you another talk about XYZ regulation, but maybe give you an insight about my work as a lawyer in the crypto industry and the thing I have witnessed, the tips I can give you, and basically the good, like maybe the good way or the better way than we have today to talk to your regulator. I'm William ORorke, a lawyer in Paris, founder of a law firm named ORwell. With which advise a lot of crypto company in Paris and abroad. For a while now, I give some lectures in some very beautiful and famous university in France. We organize with my law firm some talk about, for instance, Libra at La Sorbonne. It was 1 month ago. Very interesting with the former governor of the Bank of France. And I also participate in some public representation, like I try to help the community and the association, such as the ADAN, which is represented here by Simon, to help educate the public authority and give them like our vision of how this industry should be regulated. And it's very important because, as you all know, the legal environment in crypto asset and crypto industry is currently building. So if you want to, in my point of view, if you want to be a good lawyer, you have to understand what will happen next, because you could not stand on the legal text that actually doesn't exist yet. So yeah, as I told you, I don't want to do a talk about how to make ICO compliance or GDPR blockchain, that kind of stuff. It's like boring for me, and I think boring for you. And my purpose was to give you some tips, give you some anecdotes about the life of a lawyer in the crypto industry, and maybe what I would like to share with you, it's a part of a job that lawyers don't talk a lot, because we are never asked for, is the way we build a legal strategy for a client. The idea is you have regulation. Regulation is very actually hard for crypto-related company, because this technology touch a lot of different regulation. It's a technology about value, about trust, and these features usually attract a lot of regulation. But at the same time, a lot of you, most of the projects we see at the EthCC, for instance, are very small projects, and they are not able to fulfill all of this obligation right now. So have a legal strategy. The idea is I will be regulated. I want to know what will be my regulatory environment in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. So this is my objective, the goal I want to succeed. And the idea is to know in advance what you will need to do, what will be the step, and to smooth the regulatory burden over time. What regulation are we talking about? There is like a lot of regulation, as you know, like maybe too much. There is like very common regulation I don't want to talk with. For instance, consumer law that apply if you are selling product to consumers, so individuals. It's a kind of really important regulation. There is also business law if you are doing business with some other professional. But in the crypto industry, what you have to be very focused on is this kind of regulation. It is the main one regulation. The first one is, of course, anti-money laundering. It's a very hot topic because from the last European directive about money laundering, we were adopted in May 2018. Some crypto activities are subject to this regulation, and trust me, it's a regulation you don't want to be subject to if you don't have to really be subject to this regulation. Why? Because anti-money laundering, first of all, it's not negotiable. It's something like, I like this sentence about MC Solar, the context is more important than the concept. Even if your concept is very disruptive and new, the context is there is terrorism, there is tax evasion, there is criminal activity, and the regulator, when they are talking about anti-money laundering, they are not like innovative friendly anymore. It's that for the other kind of regulation. So you have to fulfill this regulation. First of all, you have to understand that this regulation subject to certain kind of very precise activity. So your first goal will be to understand if your activity will be subject or not to anti-money laundering, and if you are not subject, be very careful to try to do not exert kind of activities that enter into the scope of anti-money laundering. Like, but you have to understand that it's not. I often see clients who say, "I believe my activity is subject to anti-money laundering because I have crypto assets in my business model." That's not automatic. Actually, you could have activity with crypto asset without be subject to money laundering regulation. And that's very important. The other regulation, quite important, it's trade secret protection and GDPR. Why this one is important? It's less touchy in my vision, because like collecting and processing personal data is less like touchy than like managing crypto asset, of course, usually. But this regulation may attract. This regulation is enforced by regulatory body such as the DPO in London, the CNIL in France, and this regulatory bodies, they have power to like sanction you. They have power to like make inquiries on you, to ask you some compliance document. It's like a kind of police of personal data. And because of this kind of power, you have to be very careful, because even if you have not a problem with one of your users, you can be sanctioned. So it's approximately the same like kind of regulation of anti-money laundering regulation. And if you have a crypto financial activities, and once again, the scope of crypto financial activities is very, very restrained actually. It's some kind of very precise activity. You can be subject to virtual asset service provider regulation. For instance, in France, we have this kind of regulation for less than a year now. This regulation is not so wide actually, and do not carry too much like kind of obligation, except that the idea of this regulation is to subject you to the anti-money laundering regulation, which is once again the main and the first step of the regulation of crypto asset, because it's touchy, because it's risky. This is the kind of situation I live when I advise a crypto company before the regulator. You have a crypto company, we say we are building DeFi project, investment, over-collateralized asset, lending, 12% years pooling, all that kind of stuff. And the regulator in front, he do not live in the same world as you. So he could find your project very cool, and usually would say something like, it was very interesting. It's not means that it will invest in your project. It say it's a red alert button. This guy, like, this activity is dangerous. My point here is I'm very surprised to see a lot of crypto projects who, by themselves and at a very early stage, come to go and to meet the regulator. I mean, of course, the people who work in regulatory body on crypto asset are very nice people. Usually, they are like tech-savvy, young. You can meet them in this kind of conference, but never forget that regulatory bodies, they are not your friends. They are not here to help you or to solve your problem. They are here to regulate. So my advice as a lawyer, it's take your time. It's not a problem if you see the regulator 1 year later, but just when you go in front of the regulator, when you meet them, like choose your word and know what you want to do, what is the purpose of this meeting. Like it's not like a pitch before investors. Is when you meet a regulator, they will write down what you say, and the nice guys, 25 years old in front of you, very fond of blockchain, in 2 years he will be someone else, and you will have maybe a very like regulatory shark in front of you, and he will have all the information about your activity, and it will be like it's not in your advantages. Now, security token offerings, it's my favorite concept I like to destroy. Like in security token offering, there is security equals security law. Security law, it's approximately 60 years of regulation. So they don't wait blockchain, Satoshi, and all of you to have a very, very strong regulatory environment on security law. So it's equal pain and money. For us, it's very perfect because security law, it's a lot of job for lawyer, actually for army of lawyers. But don't believe that security token offering is a good way to escape from regulation. You can, of course, that is the case if you want to sell security token to the public. You can be a service provider for someone who is doing this job, a bank, a financial industry. But for what I witnessed today, the financial industry is not ready yet to deal with security token offering. And I understand that there is more like security token offering platforms that asset which are tokenized right now. Yeah, so actually, I already told that a regulator regulate, not your friend, not here to solve your legal issue. And regulator, the people who work in regulatory bodies, they change every 2 or 3 years because they are public officer. So they turn, and the first wave of people who work on this hippie things, they are young people, very smart, very nice. Maybe in 5 years, like it will have a war against DeFi, for instance. And you will really regret to have seized this guy too early. The idea about the regulation, it's you have this kind of regulation that may apply. The idea it's like be smart, do not try to avoid the regulation. Of course, if you want to do security offering, you have to apply the regulation, like period. If you want to do gambling, do it, but don't come to me to explain me what you want to do because it's not of my business. Gambling is prohibited in France, prohibited in Europe. You like go to Curacao or Malta and do it there. But if you want to do like a crypto asset activities in Europe or in USA, like the idea is deal with the regulation and do a legal strategy, like to understand what is the risk actually. That's very important to understand. The regulation is not something like on-off. It's there is risk, there is a regulation, and following the risk, like more user, more volume, more risk, whatever the risk is, more you have to be like careful about the compliance you implement into your project. But you don't need to be like more compliant than a bank if you have 2 or 3 users, of course. So that's something very important because I have often a lot of clients who come to my law firm and say, I want to be compliant with the GDPR. And I often answer them by start your services first. Regulation is like drugs. The dose makes poison actually. And that's something very important. Sorry, this slide should be at the beginning, but anyway. The regulation is not bad by itself. Of course, it costs a lot. It's time consuming, but regulation, it's a matter of trust. I mean, when I, for instance, come to the first Bitcoin meeting in Paris, it was like something like 4 years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. We were like maybe 50 people at least. In France, there were like few thousand people, maybe, I don't know, of course, who are dealing with Bitcoin. It was a very, very small community. Everybody know one each other. Everybody was really concerned and really have a deep knowledge in security, in how Bitcoin was working. It's not the same anymore. We are like thousands of people. They are taxi drivers. They are trying to buy Bitcoin, and these people like don't trust this community, so-called community, or don't trust the people who are working this field. So that's why we need regulation. Regulation is here to protect at the beginning. Or like, the purpose of the regulation is to protect the investors, protect the random people who can be stupid, who don't know how Bitcoin or DeFi is working, of course, and that's why we need actually regulation. Like in my law firm, we defend a lot of victims of scams, or we also defend a victim of misfunctioning of platform, for instance, like people who lose money because the custodian have lost the assets, and most of the time, the platform is registered in an offshore jurisdiction like Seychelles or Cayman, something like that. Actually, it doesn't exist legally, and we can't do nothing actually. So that's why regulation is needed, like at least to let the people ask to the fund back, ask to this platform to be held liable for what they did wrongly. But for you in your area, in this area, especially in DeFi, because DeFi will be regulated sooner or later. Actually, most of the DeFi is not decentralized enough. I'm sorry to be outside of the scope of regulation. The regulation will come like depending relevant factors, number of users, democratization, volume in dollar or in Ether, data you collect if you are in a data business and so on. So the idea is to have a regulatory strategy, like understand your risk. To understand your risk, there is two kinds of risk. The first one is a legal one. It's what will be the next regulation. So to be aware of this, of course you can go to a lawyer, but I'm not here to sell my business. There is also a lot of smart way and cheap way to be aware of the regulation. Be close of the association who are representing the crypto industry before the regulator, because actually it's a one-stop shop to have information about what happened in the regulatory environment, and it's usually cheap, free or really cheap. There is some people who ask directly to the regulator. As I told you, it's not often a good idea, but you can also ask to the other compliance officer who is working in the field if they accept to share with you this kind of knowledge. And the idea is, what we try to do with our clients is we advise them. At the beginning, we try to build this regulatory strategy. Say, okay, for instance, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of regulation on the left. This is the factors of risk. If you reach, for instance, 10,000 users, something should lighten on your head and say, okay, maybe I have a problem with the GDPR. I should be compliant at this step because the risk is increasing, and I have to invest into a GDPR compliance policy. This is for the obligation. Of course, you can delay some regulation. You can't. For instance, anti-money laundering in France. If you are selling crypto asset against euro, you have to implement anti-money laundering from the beginning. Of course, but my idea is to really adopt a smooth regulatory approach. Don't try to be outside the regulation if your activity is financial or if there is risk, but don't try also to be more compliant than everyone else. It doesn't make sense. You will not be competitive. The idea is to just smooth the things off. I have already finished my talk. So I thank you for your attention, and I will be very glad to answer you a question about what you want. Thank you very much.
Wait, you can do the questions now.
Mm-hmm.
You can do the questions now?
Yes.
Yeah. Any questions?
You talked about dealing with exchanges and exchanges that have been hacked. Have you been able to retrieve money for people whose account has been hacked for the big exchanges like Kraken or Coinbase or French ones?
Alors, it may happen. It's not easy actually, because of course the exchanges know that if they start to pay back, to give back the fund, there will be a lot of people who will ask the same. It will spread. But usually what we are doing as a lawyer in this, because we advise both, we can advise exchange or platform and also individual who have problem, of course not with the same platform. And we always try to negotiate. The idea is to show a little bit the muscle. It's what usually these people hire an advocate, a lawyer. So we say that we want to take a legal action, of course, but usually we also what we like to do in my law firm is to play with the regulation. They say, okay, you are not clean, 100% clean on your anti-money laundering policy. You are not 100% clean on your consumer law regulation. So we will basically call the EthCC or call the regulatory body. Yeah, that's the game as it is played right now. And that's why I say like it depends on the risk. If you have 2 users, this will never happen. If we start to have 10,000 users, if you lose the phone of 1 user, it will become crazy, and we will help him to recover the phone. Me or of course another law firm. And the regulator usually don't spend too much to watch what happened in the market. It just wait for the anonymous call saying this actor is wrong on this side. And it's true for tax, like anti-money laundering, GDPR compliance also. Yes.
Hello. Can you talk a little bit about regulatory arbitrage, and is it a strategy that you can implement in Europe? Are there significant differences between countries in the Eurozone? Is it something that's worth thinking about?
Yeah, of course, it's always in the table if the project is big enough, and the regulatory shopping. It's between a lot of regulation. It could be the tax level. It could be the labor charge. It could be, but about the anti-money laundering, which is one of the most important regulatory burden for this kind of project. It is implemented at the European level, so it's not anymore something very important for the project. But yeah, the main things it's about tax actually. Yes.
Hello. How would you deal with the situation when some stolen money came to your service? So we can avoid it, you know, as a DeFi service. So how would you handle this situation?
If you are a DeFi service, so you really have to be careful about what is exactly your power. You know, like Spider-Man, Uncle Ben, great power, great responsibility. So it's the same with the law. If you do not have any power on the way the crypto asset come in and comes out, you could not be held liable for this. But you really have to be careful of what is exactly the power. If there is a reset kill switch button, if you have a way to manage a smart contract, that kind of stuff, you can be held liable. And if this like crypto asset come from Daesh or something like this, you will be held liable sooner or later. So yeah, that's my only advice.
How in general for services that provide privacy for users, like private transaction, how they make sure that they're compliant with anti-money laundering laws in general?
But once again, it depends about the power. You have the right, and I encourage you as a lawyer, like also dedicated in privacy law and privacy subject, to implement this kind of regulation. Because actually, like today, the transparency of Bitcoin and Ether, it's a real problem, like for privacy actually. But that's another topic. Like if you do not have the power to see what your user is doing with, I don't know, Monero, for instance, or services which is like obfuscating what happened in the blockchain, it's okay. You will be by itself outside of the scope of anti-money laundering. Anyway, anti-money laundering subject into intermediaries, and today in Europe, these intermediaries is custodial services, so the bank of crypto, and exchange fiat to crypto or crypto to fiat. And in crypto to fiat exchange, of course, the anti-money laundering on the fiat side, it's not easy, but it's something very common now. And on the crypto side, you do not need to have technical services such as chain analysis or this kind of thing. It's interesting for me, but it's not the way we do anti-money laundering. Anti-money laundering, you just have to know, like, if the people in front of you, if, I don't know, you are a student and you earn 1,000 euros a month and you deposit like 1 million, there is a problem. And I will ask you document, but very like paper document, like your revenue, your tax audit, that kind of stuff. It has nothing to do about what you want to buy, as what coin you want to buy, or what coin you want to deposit. Of course, if you want to deposit 1 million of Monero, I will be a little bit more attentive about where it comes from. But yeah, It's exactly the same when you have a tax audit by the French administration. For instance, they start to control the taxpayer who have a huge amount of crypto. They don't ask for the nature of the crypto. They don't care. They just ask for the bank receipt, and they ask for your revenue, and everything is current in euro. And after that, they have like quite precise like pictures about where the money comes from, where you have declare. I don't know the name in English, but the information you give them.
Hello. You said that the regulatory activities should basically grow with your project, right? So you have a smooth transition. What do you advise on the first day, like on day 0 of the project? What kind of documentation or activities should I do on the first day?
Usually, I start by creating a company. I mean, it seems obvious, but no. But I have some clients who arrive. I'm dealing with $5 million a week in DeFi activity. I'm independent. I'm nothing. So first, create a company, be very transparent, and like implement contractual safeguard, because it's the beginning of the beginning. I mean, at least cap your liability contractually. We at least will have a small weapon to defend ourselves, to defend you if somebody lost their phone and want to sue you. And after that, we try to rank the regulations that may apply, which that apply, which that not apply. And if, for instance, if you are in the anti-money laundering regulation, it's very important to be fast on this, to deal with the regulator, to explain to the regulators that you are a very small company, because they are not used to deal with a startup at all. It's the first time for the last 20 years that they have like people like you and even us in front of them. Usually it's a bank, it's financial industry, you know, always the same guys. It was very convenient for them. We try to explain them that you are young, you don't have so much users, you are starting, and they understand, like, time to time they try to slightly like slow down the regulation pressure on you, or to give you some times. But yeah, it's still a AML regulatory regulation. So that can be the kind. But for instance, GDPR, for me, I always wait to see how many users you have. Of course, it does not make sense to have a GDPR compliance policy if you have like 50 users. I mean, you can call them, like, or you have a Telegram group. There is a problem. You know, they know where you live. So.
Thank you.
Hi, one basic question. What if I am offering services for European users, but my nodes are in the US? Should I comply to both US and European regulation?
Usually the regulation apply where you are addressing in the country you are addressing your services. So if you are in Shanghai and you're addressing the French market, you will have to comply with the French compliances environment.
Okay.
I mean, for the regulation like such as anti-money laundering or consumer law, of course, about the tax compliance, it's in the country you are based. You are based. Thank you very much. Goodbye.